She stood at the edge of the kitchen counter, pen in hand, heart already bleeding before the ink dried. 3 years of marriage reduced to signature. 3 years of loving a man who looked through her like glass, who forgot her name in rooms full of people, who came home smelling like ambition and never once asked if she was okay. Imani pressed the pen to paper and signed. No tears, no dramatics, just the quiet devastation of a woman who had finally stopped waiting to matter. She slid the papers across the marble counter and walked to the bedroom to pack. She did not hear the front door open. She did not hear the sharp intake of breath when her husband's lawyer found the papers already signed. She did not know that across the city, in a glass tower that made lesser men nervous just standing beneath it, a Korean man with cold eyes and colder enemies had just received a file with her photograph inside. He studied it for exactly 4 seconds. Then he picked up his phone and said 3 words that would detonate both their lives. Find her now. Welcome to Afro-Korean culture. Please like, share, and subscribe. Imani Ademi had a system for surviving her own life. Wake up at 5. Make coffee strong enough to replace the feeling she used to get when her husband looked at her. Get dressed in something that made her feel like a person and not a ghost. Go to work, come home, repeat. It was not a beautiful life, but it was hers, and she had been holding it together with both hands for longer than she cared to count. The divorce had been her idea. That was the part people would not understand. They would look at Kwame with his tailor-made suits and his imported cologne and his effortless charm at dinner parties, and they would wonder what woman in her right mind would walk away from that. Imani had been wondering the same thing for 2 years before she finally accepted the answer. A woman who was tired of being invisible. She had packed only what she needed. 2 suitcases, her grandmother's jewelry box, the small framed photo of her mother that she kept on the nightstand even after everything. She did not take the designer bags Kwame bought when he forgot anniversaries. She did not take the jewelry that came with apologies. She left them arranged neatly on the dresser like evidence of a crime she was done prosecuting. Her friend Zara had a spare room in Mapogu, close enough to her job at the textile import firm, far enough from the neighborhood where everyone knew Kwame's name before they learned hers. The next morning, Imani started over. She was good at starting over. She had done it when she left Lagos at 22 with 1 suitcase and a scholarship. She had done it when the scholarship ran dry and she had to find work before she found her footing. She had done it when she married Kwame believing love was enough to build on, and then slowly learned that love without attention was just loneliness with better furniture. Starting over was her language. She was fluent in it. The textile firm was in Seongsudong, a narrow building wedged between a coffee roaster and a place that sold handmade leather bags. Imani's job was authentication and sourcing, which meant she spent her days touching fabric and telling the truth about it. She was extraordinarily good at this. She could feel a lie in a thread count the way other people felt weather changes in their joints. Her boss, Mr. Cho, had once watched her identify a fraudulent silk shipment in under 3 minutes and said nothing for a full 30 seconds afterward. He never questioned her instincts again. It was a Tuesday when everything changed. She remembered because she had eaten the same lunch she always ate on Tuesdays, rice and pepper soup from the woman who set up a small cart on the corner, and she had been sitting at her desk reading through a new shipment manifest when Mr. Cho appeared in the doorway looking the color of old chalk. "There are men downstairs," he said. "They want to speak with you." Imani looked up. "What kind of men?" "The kind," Mr. Cho said carefully, "that you do not keep waiting." She went downstairs. There were 2 of them standing near the entrance with the particular stillness of people trained not to fidget. They were dressed well, too well for a Tuesday afternoon in Seongsudong. One of them handed her a card. It was heavy cardstock, cream-colored with nothing on it but a name and a time. Shin Woo-jin, 7 o'clock tonight. She did not recognize the name, but something about the weight of the card in her palm told her she was supposed to. "I don't have meetings at 7, she said. The taller of the 2 men smiled without showing teeth. "You do now." Later that evening, she found herself in the back of a car that smelled like cedar and expensive leather, being driven somewhere she had not agreed to go and yet somehow had not refused. Zara had texted 3 times asking where she was. Imani replied each time with fine and a period, which Zara understood meant something is happening but I cannot explain it yet. The building they pulled up to had no sign outside. That told her more than a sign would have. Inside, everything was the kind of quiet that cost money to maintain. She was led through a lobby, into an elevator that opened directly into a private floor, and then into a room where a man stood at a window with his back to her, looking out at Seoul like he owned the skyline and was mildly bored by it. He turned when she walked in. Imani had prepared herself for something. She had not prepared herself for him. He was tall, sharp-jawed, with the kind of face that made you forget to blink. His suit was dark and perfectly fitted, and he wore it the way powerful men wore things, like clothing was armor, and he had never once needed to prove it. His eyes were the part that undid her, not because they were beautiful, though they were, but because they were looking at her like they had been waiting for her specifically, like she was the answer to a question he had been carrying for a long time. Imani, he said, her name in his mouth felt like something being named for the first time. You have the wrong person, she said. He almost smiled. Sit down. She sat, not because he told her to, because her knees had made the decision before her pride could intervene. His name was Shin Woo-jin. She would learn over the next hour that this name meant different things to different people in Seoul. To city officials it meant careful compliance, to business partners it meant profitable caution. To the men who moved through the underground economy of the city it meant something else entirely, something spoken quietly and only when necessary. He told her none of this directly. He did not need to. The room told her. The men outside the door told her. The way Mr. Cho had looked when he said the word men told her. What he did tell her with a directness that made her spine straighten involuntarily was this. Your ex-husband has been using your identity in a financial fraud scheme. The papers you signed yesterday were not just divorce papers. Buried in the documentation was a clause that made you a named partner in a shell company he has been using to launder money for the past 18 months. The people he owes money to are not patient people, and because your name is on those papers, they are now looking for you. The room became very still. He owes people, she said slowly, people like you. He looked at her without blinking. People I know, yes. How much? Enough that your name being attached to his debt is a serious problem. Imani breathed in and breathed out and thought about the pen in her hand that morning, and the way she had signed without reading because she had been so desperate to be done, to be free, to close the door on 3 years of making herself small. She thought about Kwam's lawyer who had been almost too helpful, almost too quick to push the papers across the table. She thought about how Kwam had not looked at her once during the entire 30-minute meeting. She was not going to cry, she was far too angry to cry. What do you want from me, she said. His expression shifted, just slightly. Something moved behind his eyes that was not quite calculation and not quite warmth but sat exactly in between. I want to help you, he said. You don't know me. I know more than you think. She stared at him. That should have frightened her. It did not frighten her. It made her curious, which was somehow more dangerous. Why, she said. He was quiet for a moment, long enough that she started to believe he would not answer. Then he said, because 6 months ago you authenticated a shipment of stolen kente cloth that passed through this city. You identified it as stolen. You refused the payment that came with staying quiet about it, and then you reported it to the right people without knowing who those people were connected to. I did my job, she said. You did the right thing, he said. When doing the right thing was expensive, he tilted his head. I don't forget things like that. She looked at him for a long time. He did not look away. Okay, she finally said, what does help look like? It starts with you not going back to your friend's apartment tonight. Imani opened her mouth. They already know that address, he said quietly. I am sorry. She closed her mouth. She thought about Zara, who had 3 houseplants and a cat named Biscuit and absolutely no part in any of this. Fear moved through her, quick and cold. Can she stay somewhere else tonight? Imani said, my friend. Already arranged, he said. She will receive a message in the next 10 minutes from someone she trusts. She will be safe. Imani stared at him. How? I told you I know more than you think. She should have been furious. She was furious. She was also, underneath the fury, something else, something she did not have a word for yet, something that lived in the space between terrified and relieved and dangerously, inconveniently aware of how close he was standing. She looked down at her hands, then back up at him. If I stay, she said, this is not me agreeing to anything else. I have conditions. He tilted his head. Tell me your conditions. And she did. She laid them out flat and clear, the way she laid out fabric samples when she needed to assess what she was working with. No lies between them when they were alone, no decisions made on her behalf without her knowledge, no using her as a pawn in whatever game was already in motion, no pretending this was something it was not. He listened to every word. When she was done, he said, agreed. Just like that, she said. Just like that. There was something in his voice that she would spend a long time thinking about later, not the word itself but the certainty underneath it, like agreeing to her was not a concession, like it was something he had already decided before she asked. She was shown to a room at the end of a long corridor. It was simple, beautiful, clean, nothing performative about it. The window looked out over the Han River and the lights on the water moved like breathing. She stood at the glass for a long time after the door closed. She had signed her name this morning to end one life. She had not expected to walk directly into another one. But Imani Adami had a system for surviving. And right now that system said breathe, assess, do not fall apart until you understand the terrain. She breathed, she assessed, she did not fall apart. She went to bed without crying and woke up at 5 the next morning out of pure muscle memory, and the first thing she thought was that the coffee in this building was probably extraordinary, and the second thing she thought was that she was in serious trouble. Not the kind Wu Jin had described. The other kind. The kind that arrived quietly and felt like warmth. The first week passed in a strange, suspended rhythm that Imani did not have a category for. She went to work, because Wu Jin had said the threat was manageable during daylight hours, and that the firm was safer than it looked. Its building sharing a wall with a security infrastructure that most people never noticed. A driver collected her each morning and returned her each evening. She ate dinner in the apartment on the top floor that had become, without any formal announcement, hers for the time being. Wu Jin ate dinner with her 3 times that week. The first time she thought it was coincidence. The second time she thought it was habit. The third time she stopped thinking about what it was and started paying attention to the way he listened when she talked. Most powerful men she had encountered treated conversation like a transaction. He treated it like a subject he was studying, not in a way that felt clinical or strategic, in a way that felt like he was memorizing her. She told him about the textile work on the third evening, more than she meant to, about how she had learned to read fabric from her grandmother in Ibadan, an old woman with hands like bark and an eye for authenticity that no machine had ever replicated, about how that knowledge had followed her to Lagos and then to Seoul, mutating into a career she had not planned but had grown to love with a fierceness that surprised her. Wu Jin listened without interrupting, which was already unusual. Then he asked a question that made her pause. "What does it feel like," he said, "when you touch something real versus something fake?" She thought about it, like the difference, she said slowly, between a conversation and a performance. The real thing has weight, texture, it doesn't need to announce itself. He was quiet for a moment, then he said, "I think you apply that to more than fabric." She looked at him, he was looking back. The air between them did something she chose not to name. Later that night, Zara called. She was staying with a cousin across the city, confused but safe, and using the kind of voice that meant she had already formed 4 theories and was waiting for Imani to confirm or deny them. "He's attractive, isn't he?" Zara said. "That is not the relevant detail," Imani said. "It's always the relevant detail. How attractive are we talking?" Imani looked at the ceiling, dangerously, very dangerously. Zara made a sound. "Okay, so this is going to be complicated." "It's already complicated. But do you feel safe?" Imani considered this honestly, which was the only way she knew how to consider things. "Yes," she said, which is the most confusing part. The danger arrived properly on a Thursday, which was, in Imani's experience, exactly when things tended to go wrong. She was at the firm reviewing a new consignment when 2 men she did not recognize came through the front door. They were not the kind of men who browsed fabric. They stood inside the entrance and scanned the room with eyes like surveillance cameras, landing on her and staying there. Imani was already moving toward the back exit when her phone buzzed. "Don't use the back door, there's a car at the side entrance, second alley, go now." She went, the car was there. She got in and they drove without speaking for 11 minutes before she allowed herself to exhale. Wu Jin met her in the underground parking level of the building, already coatless. His jaw set in the particular way she was starting to recognize meant he had already handled something unpleasant and was working out how to tell her without frightening her more than necessary. "Are you hurt?" he said, first thing before anything else. "No," she said. He looked at her for 3 full seconds, the way someone looks when they need to confirm a fact with their own eyes and not just be told it. Then he nodded once and some tension left his shoulders. "Quame's contact made a move," he said, "earlier than expected. We've relocated the firm's security. Mr. Cho and the others have been informed there's a gas concern and the building is closed for the day." "You didn't tell them the truth." "It would have frightened them unnecessarily. The situation is managed." Imani studied his face. He believed that. She could see it. He was not placating her, he was reporting. "What happens next?" she said. "He wants to talk. He's been asking through intermediaries to arrange a meeting." "Quame?" "Yes." She laughed. It was short and not entirely humorous. "What could he possibly want to say to me?" Wu Jin's expression shifted into something harder. He may want to use you as leverage with the people he owes. Show them he has influence over you, access to you. So he would offer me up. He would try to, Wu Jin said, then quietly he would not succeed. She looked at him. Something about the certainty in those four words, quiet and absolute and entirely without performance, did something to the inside of her chest that she could not catalog and refused to examine. I don't need protection, she said, out of habit more than conviction. I know, he said, you also don't need to do it alone. She looked away before her face said something she was not ready to say. A few days later, Wu Jin's second-in-command, a man named Park Seon-hyuk who had the energy of someone who had heard everything twice and was mildly exhausted by all of it, informed Manny that Wu Jin had not slept more than 4 hours in 3 days. She received this information while eating breakfast at the kitchen counter and made no comment. But she thought about it. All day she thought about it. That evening she made jollof rice. She had found the ingredients in the kitchen with the particular helplessness of someone who had been told to make himself at home in someone else's space and did not know where anything was. Mrs. Lee, who managed the residence, had stood in the doorway watching her with the expression of a woman witnessing something she would discuss later. Wu Jin appeared in the kitchen at 9, still in his work clothes, jacket gone, sleeves pushed up. Looking like a man who had been making decisions at great personal cost all day and was approximately 3 hours past when he should have stopped. He stopped when he smelled the food. Imani did not look up from the pot. Sit down, she said. He sat, without argument, which told her everything she needed to know about how tired he actually was. She served him and sat across the counter and watched him take the first bite. He was quiet for a long moment, then he said, "This is..." "I know," she said. "How?" "My grandmother, I told you about her." He looked up. "You remembered I was listening." "You always listen," she said, then immediately wished she hadn't because saying it out loud made it real in a way she was not prepared for. He set down his chopsticks and looked at her with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Open, unguarded, almost undone, she looked back because she did not know how to look away. The kitchen felt very small. The city outside was a distant murmur. "Imani," he said. "Don't," she said. Her voice was steady. Her hands under the counter were not. He nodded slowly and said nothing else. But he finished the food, every bite, and when he left he touched the back of her hand once, briefly, like something he could not stop himself from doing. And then he was gone and she sat alone in the kitchen with a pot that needed washing and a heart that was doing something wildly inconvenient. Now, before we continue, if this story has already gotten under your skin, if you felt that kitchen scene in your chest, I need you to do something for me. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications because what happens next is going to pull you completely apart. We are not even close to done. Stay right here. The arrangement between them continued for another week with the particular intensity of two people who have decided, separately and for good reason, not to act on something that is very clearly there. Imani watched herself become comfortable in his world, which was not the same as becoming comfortable with the danger of it. She understood the difference. She had always been good at that kind of accounting. Then Quaim called. She did not know how he got the number. Wu Jin's expression when she told him suggested he already suspected but had not wanted to alarm her preemptively. The call had been 2 minutes of Quaim's voice doing the thing it always did, smooth and reasonable and carefully calibrated to make her feel like the unreasonable one. He said he needed to meet her. He said it was for her own protection. He said the people he owed were not patient and the only way to remove her name from the paperwork was for her to sign new documents, in person, somewhere neutral. She had listened to all of it without speaking, then she had said one sentence, "I'll have to get back to you," and ended the call. Wu Jin was there when she put the phone down. He had been reading something across the room and had not appeared to be listening, but she knew better. "He's lying," she said. "Yes," Wu Jin said. "The documents he wants me to sign would make things worse, not better. There is no neutral meeting. He would be delivering you to the people he owes." She absorbed this, 3 years of her life, she said quietly, and he was using me the entire time. Wu Jin set down whatever he was reading and looked at her directly. "I don't know when it started, but the financial records suggest at least 18 months. So most of the last year of our marriage." "Yes." She thought about the last year. She thought about the distance, the distraction, the way Quaim had seemed relieved rather than sad when she suggested the divorce. She thought about how she had interpreted all of it as evidence that he had stopped loving her, never once considering that it might have been something far more calculated than that. "I need some air," she said. He stood up. "Alone," she added. He sat back down, but she felt his eyes follow her to the door. She stood on the terrace for 40 minutes looking at the Han River and being comprehensively furious. Not at Wu Jin, not at the situation. At the 3 years she had spent trying to be enough for a man who had been using her name the way you use a tool, without thought, without care, with the easy confidence of someone who expects it to always be available. The door opened behind her, she did not turn around. "I told Xianhyuk to stay inside," Wu Jin said. "But not yourself. I said you needed to be alone, I didn't say I could manage it." She turned then. He was standing a few feet away, coat on against the night air, hands in his pockets, watching her with that expression she had started to associate with the moments when he stopped calculating and just was. "You are the most controlled person I have ever met," she said, "except when it comes to this." He held her gaze. Yes. That one word, simple and undefended, did more damage to her composure than anything else he could have said. She looked back at the river. He came to stand beside her. They were close enough that she could feel the warmth of him against the cold air. "I was going to keep this professional," she said. "So was I. What changed?" He was quiet. "Then you made rice at 9 at night because Sion Hyuk told you I wasn't sleeping and you didn't tell me that's why you did it. You just did it." He exhaled. "No one does things like that for me without wanting something in return. You just did it because it was the right thing." He paused. "That's when I stopped pretending." Imani did not trust her voice, so she said nothing. He did not press. They stood there in the cold with the city blazing beneath them and the silence between them dense and electric and full of everything neither of them was saying. His hand found hers at the railing. He did not hold it. He just placed his over hers, warm and careful, and left it there like a question. She did not move away. The answer to Quame's call came through Wu Jin's channels, not Imani's. A message was sent through the appropriate intermediaries indicating that Imani would not be meeting anyone anywhere, that the documentation issue was being handled through legal means, and that anyone who continued to connect her name to the debt situation would find themselves facing a particular kind of scrutiny that tends to make financial fraud cases accelerate considerably. Quame went quiet for 4 days. Imani spent those days at work, which had resumed normal hours under substantially increased security that appeared to everyone outside as routine building maintenance. She authenticated 3 shipments, identified 1 fraudulent dye lot, and had a long conversation with Young-ho, the silk designer she had known since her first year in Seoul, about whether natural dyes could survive industrial scaling without losing integrity. Woo Jin appeared at the firm on the 3rd day, not to see her officially. He was meeting with someone in one of the upper offices on what Sion Hyuk described vaguely as a property matter. Imani found out because she had been coming up the stairs with a bolt of reference fabric over her shoulder, and she turned the corner and there he was in the corridor, in the middle of a conversation that stopped the moment he saw her. The men he was with looked at her, then at him. Something shifted in the room that Imani could not name, but that made his second-in-command suddenly find his phone very interesting. Woo Jin said something brief in Korean and the others moved off. He crossed the corridor. "You have fabric on your cheek," he said. She reached up. He got there first, a single pass of his thumb across her cheekbone, so quick and natural that she almost missed how significant it was. He did not do unnecessary things. Every action was deliberate. This one said something he was not saying with words. She looked up at him, he looked back. The corridor was empty. The night everything broke open was a Friday. She was in the residence kitchen again, this time making tea, when she heard raised voices from Woo Jin's office at the end of the hall. Not shouting, nothing as uncontrolled as that, but a sharpness in the cadence that meant something was wrong. She did not go toward the office. She made her tea and sat down and waited. Sion Hyuk appeared 20 minutes later with the expression of a man who has been asked to deliver bad news and is choosing his words with surgical precision. "There's been a development," he said. "Quame made contact with a rival faction tonight. People who have been looking for an opportunity to move against Mr. Shin. He has offered them information about your location and your relationship with Mr. Shin in exchange for his debt being cleared." Imani set down her cup. "What kind of information?" "Fabricated information, mostly. But in this world, fabricated information in the right hands is as effective as real information for causing damage." "So he's going to start a war over me," she said. and use me as the weapon. Sion Hayek looked at her with a kind of quiet respect she had not expected from him. That is an accurate summary, he said. Mr. Shin is deciding how to respond. She stood up. Take me to him. He paused. He specifically said. I know what he specifically said. Take me to him anyway. There was a beat, then Sion Hayek nodded once and led her down the hall. Wu Jin was standing at the window when she walked in. He turned and she could see it immediately, the controlled fury, the weight of a decision already being processed. He was not surprised to see her, which meant he had expected her to come despite whatever instructions he had given. This is my fault, she said before he could speak. No, he said, it is not. He is using my name, my presence here if I were not. If you were not here, he said sharply, you would be significantly less safe than you are right now. He stopped, took a breath. The anger was not at her, she could see that clearly. It was at the situation at Quame, at a world that required him to manage harm instead of prevent it. She crossed the room. This was the thing about Imani Ademi, she had never in her life been able to watch someone carry something alone when she could help carry it. She stopped in front of him, close. He looked down at her. Tell me what you need, she said. Something broke in his expression, just slightly, just enough. You, he said quietly, to stay where I can see you, that is all I need tonight. She held his gaze. I'm here. He reached out and touched her jaw, tilting her face up, and looked at her the way she had imagined him looking at her in the moments she pretended she wasn't imagining anything. Then he kissed her, not urgently, not explosively, slowly, carefully, the way he did everything deliberate and full of intention, as though he had thought about this exact moment many times and wanted to get it right. She kissed him back, her hands in the lapels of his jacket, his hands steady and warm on her face. The city outside continued its indifferent breathing, and inside this room 2 people who had been circling a truth for weeks finally stood still in the middle of it. She pulled back first, he let her, which was part of what undid her. This changes things, she said. Everything, he agreed. She looked at him. I need to think. He nodded. He did not pursue, did not argue, just looked at her with those steady dark eyes and said, I'll be here. She went back to her room. She sat on the edge of the bed with her hands in her lap and thought about signatures, about the one that had ended her marriage and the one that had entangled her in someone else's debt, and the way nothing she had signed had ever meant what she thought it meant until tonight, when she had kissed a man who ran half the underground economy of soul and felt, for the first time in 3 years, entirely, terrifyingly seen. She was awake for a long time. When she finally slept, she dreamed about fabric, the real kind with weight and texture and no need to announce itself. She woke up to silence and a message from Sion Hayek. Come to the briefing room, bring nothing, be ready. The next 3 days were the fastest and most disorienting of her life. The rival faction that Quame had contacted had moved sooner than expected. This was apparently unusual and suggested either desperation or outside pressure, both of which Wu Jin's people were working to trace. In the meantime, Imani was relocated to a secondary location, a quiet house in the hills north of the city, with a kitchen garden and 3 security personnel who played cards in the evenings and pretended not to watch her every move. Wu Jin was not there. He was in the city managing the situation from closer range, and the distance between them felt, in ways she did not want to examine, like a physical thing. She threw herself into work remotely, reviewing authentication files that Young-ho sent her, writing detailed reports on a questionable shipment from a new European supplier. She called Zara. She made food she didn't eat. She looked at her phone more often than she would admit. On the second evening, a message came, 4 words. Are you sleeping? She typed back, barely. You. Working, go to sleep. She almost smiled. She did not go to sleep. 2 hours later, her phone rang. She answered before it had finished the first ring. I wanted to hear your voice, he said without preamble. She leaned back against the headboard in the dark. That's not very controlled of you, she said. No, he agreed, it is. Are you all right? I'm trying to be, she said honestly. I keep thinking about Quame, not missing him, just thinking about what I didn't see. You couldn't have seen it, he was careful. I should have been more careful. He was quiet for a moment. Or you trusted someone you had chosen to trust. That is not the same as being careless. She absorbed this. She thought about it for a long time after they hung up. On the 3rd day, Quame was found. Not by Wu Jin's people, which was a deliberate choice. by the Financial Crimes Unit of the Seoul Metropolitan Police, acting on documentation that had been anonymously forwarded to them. Documentation that was comprehensive, accurate, and left no reasonable ambiguity about who had been doing what with whose identity. The rival faction, finding themselves suddenly without leverage and with a very angry Woo Jin sending signals through every appropriate channel, withdrew with the particular speed of people reconsidering their investments. Seon Hyuk called Imani at noon on the fourth day. "You can come back," he said, "it's over." She was in the kitchen garden when he called, sitting on a low stone wall with her face in the sun, and she sat there for another few minutes after he hung up, just breathing in the quiet. "It's over," she said aloud to no one. She was not sure she believed it yet, but she was ready to try. She was back in the city by evening. Woo Jin met her at the building entrance. In 3 days he looked like he had aged 3 years and lost them again simultaneously, like he had been through something and come out the other side and was still calibrating what that meant. They stood in the entrance for a moment. "It's done," he said. "I know," Seon Hyuk told me. "The documentation." "I know what it was," she said, "thank you." He shook his head slightly. "Don't thank me for that." She looked at him, he looked back. The entrance was very quiet. "I thought about what you said," she said, "about doing the right thing when it's expensive." She paused. "You do that?" He said nothing. "You didn't have to help me," she continued. "You could have managed the debt situation a dozen other ways that didn't involve me being in your building for 2 weeks. She kept her eyes on his. "Why did it go this way?" He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "Because the morning after you authenticated that shipment and turned down the money and reported it anyway, I asked Seon Hyuk everything he could find out about you. I read the file he sent me 3 times. And then I read it a 4th time because the first 3 times I was reading it to understand a variable, and the 4th time I was just reading it." Her throat felt tight. "And then 6 months later your name showed up in a document I needed to deal with, and I made a choice," he said, "about how to deal with it." "You chose the complicated way." "I chose the way," he said simply, "that meant you were safe." Imani breathed. She thought about choices, the ones she had made and the ones that had been made without her knowledge and the one she was making right now, standing in this entrance looking at this man. She stepped forward and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers immediately, without hesitation. "Whatever this is," she said. "Whatever this is," he agreed. They walked inside. The weeks that followed were not simple. They never were. There was a divorce settlement to finalize because Quame's legal troubles did not automatically dissolve the documentation issues, and Imani's lawyer, a fierce woman named Attorney Sia who seemed to run entirely on black coffee and righteous anger, had to untangle several months of fraudulent paperwork before Imani's name was fully and legally clear. There were meetings, filings, frustrating days when progress moved at the pace of bureaucracy. Through all of it, Woo Jin was present, not intrusively, not in a way that removed her agency or made decisions for her. But he was there the way a structural wall is there, steady and load-bearing, not requiring acknowledgement but making everything around it more possible. He met Attorney Sia once, briefly, in a hallway encounter that Imani witnessed from 5 steps behind. Nothing was said that she heard, but Attorney Sia had emerged from that conversation with the particular expression of a person who has just received confirmation of something they were already fairly certain about. And she had moved through the rest of the filing process at double speed. Imani did not ask what was said, some things she was willing to take on faith. She moved out of the building's residence 2 months after she had moved in, into an apartment in Seongsudong close enough to the firm that she could walk in good weather. Woo Jin helped her move, not the security detail. Him, in jeans and a gray sweater, carrying boxes with the focused competence of someone who approaches every physical task with the same seriousness he brings to everything else. When the last box was in and Mrs. Lee had pressed 2 containers of home-cooked food into Imani's hands with the urgency of a woman who considers underfeeding a personal failure, Woo Jin stood in the center of the small living room and looked around. "It needs plants," he said. "It needs furniture first," she said. He nodded. "There is a market in Mapo on Saturdays." She looked at him. "Are you asking to go to a Saturday market with me?" He looked back. "I am informing you of a market's existence and its hours." She pressed her lips together against a smile. "That is not the same thing." "It could become the same thing," he said, "if you wanted." She wanted. 6 months later, on a Saturday in early spring, They were at the market in Mappa with a cart full of things they probably did not need when Amani's phone buzzed with a message from Zara that contained only a series of increasingly expressive emojis in response to a photo Amani had sent without thinking. A photo of Woojin holding a small potted succulent with an expression of deep uncertainty, looking at her for guidance. She was laughing when he looked up. He looked at her laughing and something moved across his face, unhurried and certain. "What?" she said. He set the succulent down. He took her hand. In the middle of the market, in the ordinary noise of a Saturday morning, he looked at her with those dark, steady eyes and said, "I want this to be the thing. You and I, this, whatever it becomes, I want this to be the thing." She held his gaze. "You are terrible at being romantic," she said. "I know, I'm trying." She squeezed his hand. "It's working," she said. "Against all logic, it is working." He almost smiled. "We should get the succulent." "We absolutely should," she agreed. They got the succulent. They got 3 more things they did not need. They had lunch at a small restaurant where the owner knew Woo Jin by name and brought food without being asked, and Amani thought about signatures again, the one that had ended things, the one that had entangled her. And the one she was beginning to understand. She was writing now in a language that had nothing to do with paper or ink, a language made of Saturday markets and late phone calls and a man who had read her file 4 times and chosen the complicated way. Attorney Seo called on a Tuesday 3 weeks later. "Everything is finalized," she said. "Your name is completely clear, there is nothing left." Imani sat at her desk and felt the last weight lift off her shoulders. "Thank you," she said. "Thank your friend," Attorney Seo said with a dryness that suggested she found the word friend insufficient. He was very motivated. She ended the call. She looked at her phone for a moment, then she called Woo Jin. He answered on the second ring. "It's done," she said, "completely." A pause. "Are you relieved?" "Completely," she said. Another pause. "Dinner tonight?" It was not a question. She had noticed he had stopped framing things as questions when he already knew the answer. "Yes," she said. "Good." He paused again. "Imani." "Yes." "I have something to ask you," he said, "tonight." She felt her heart do something she was past pretending not to notice. "Okay," she said. He hung up, which was extremely like him. She sat for a moment with the phone in her hand and the afternoon light coming through the window and the smell of the fabric samples all around her, and she thought about her grandmother in Ibadan who had told her once that the real things always have weight, the real things have texture, the real things do not need to announce themselves. You just have to be willing to touch them and feel the truth. She put the phone in her pocket and went back to work. She was smiling. She could not help it. She was smiling the way people smile when something they were afraid to want has turned out to be real after all, substantial and textured and true, and the only thing left to do is stop pretending they were not hopping for it all along. That evening, over dinner in a restaurant with no sign outside that turned out to be the kind of beautiful that did not need one, Shin Woo-jin reached across the table and set a small box in front of her without ceremony or excessive preamble, which was exactly how she had always known he would do it. He said her name once. She opened the box. She looked at what was inside. She looked at him. "I am not good at speeches," he said. "You know this." "I know this," she said. "You make me want to be better at them." He held her gaze. "You made me want a lot of things I had stopped letting myself want. I would like to keep wanting them, with you, if you'll let me." She looked at the ring in the box, then back at him. "You read my file 4 times," she said. He nodded. "And that was when you decided." "That was when I started," he said. "I finished deciding the night you made rice because you knew I wasn't sleeping." She breathed out slowly. "Yes," she said. Yes to the speech or yes to the question? Both, she said, definitely both. He reached across the table and put the ring on her finger himself, carefully, as he did everything. And when he looked up, his eyes held something she had been watching build for months, open and warm and entirely certain. Imani Adami had signed her name to many things. Some had cost her, some had nearly broken her. But this one, this small claiming, this yes across a dinner table in a city she had chosen and a life she had built and a love she had not been looking for but had found anyway in the most inconvenient and terrifying and extraordinary way, this one she signed freely with her whole self, and she felt the weight of it and she knew it was real. Outside, Seoul moved through its evening the way it always did, enormous and indifferent and blazing. Inside, 2 people sat across from each other in the small warm light of a restaurant that did not need a sign and the city could wait. The year that followed was full, not in the overwhelming way years sometimes are, but in the way of things that have substance and weight. They married in the spring, a small ceremony that Zara described in her toast as criminally low-key for something this cinematic, and that Woo Jin described to Manny the morning after as exactly right. In the autumn, she learned she was pregnant and told him on a Tuesday morning over coffee, which was when she told him most things that mattered, and he set down his cup and looked at her for a long moment with something in his face that she had no word for except complete. By the following spring, she held their daughter for the first time in a room full of morning light, and Woo Jin sat beside her on the edge of the bed and looked at them both with the expression of a man who has spent 14 years building walls and has finally, deliberately, willingly, taken every last one of them down. She looked at him, he looked back. She did not need to say anything. The real things have weight, the real things do not need to announce themselves. They both knew.